The morning light came thin and cold across Dust Creek, catching on the windmill blades like a whisper of steel. The prairie stretched wide and pale, a sea of dying gold where the wind spoke in long, lonesome breaths. On the porch of a weather-worn ranch house sat Elias Boone, hat in his hands, boots still crusted with the dust of yesterday. The cradle beside him rocked faintly, creaking in rhythm with the wind. Inside it, the baby whimpered, dry, weak, hungry. The sound tore through the quiet like a bird trapped in a chimney. He lifted her, small as a shadow, her face wrinkled and red. The milk in the tin cup had gone sour again. He'd tried watering it down, but she turned her head away, mouth trembling. "Hush now, Mabel," he murmured, voice raw. "I'm here." But she did not stop crying, and the wind carried that thin wail through the broken fence rails, out toward the empty land that had once been full of Clara's laughter. It had been 3 weeks since she'd gone, 3 weeks since the birthing took her. The grave still looked fresh, the mound of earth rising like a scar on the hill beyond the corral. Elias couldn't bear to look at it too long. He'd tried once to pray, but the words stuck in his throat like dust. At night, he talked to her anyway, whispering into the rafters, telling her what the baby had done that day, as if she were listening from just beyond the lamplight. The townsfolk of Dust Creek said a man shouldn't raise a child alone. They said he'd lost his mind sitting out here with the wind and the baby, letting both starve. He didn't argue. Shame had made a quiet home inside him. The house still smelled faintly of Clara's lavender soap, though the scent faded more each day. The walls held their silence close. He rocked Mabel until her cries softened into sleep, then set her down gently and went to split wood. The axe came down in dull, steady rhythm, each swing a small defiance against despair. Still, the silence behind him pressed close. Every time he paused, he heard the baby stir, the faint rustle of her tiny breath. He wondered if he was enough, for her, for anything. When the knock came, it was so soft he thought he'd imagined it. A single rap against the door, hesitant, almost shy. He froze, the axe slipping from his grip. The sound came again. 3 knocks this time, the rhythm uncertain. No one had come by since the funeral. He wiped his hands on his trousers and opened the door. A woman stood there, framed by the sunlight. She was wrapped in a gray shawl, dust on her boots, her hair pulled back in a hurried braid. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear, the kind of eyes that had looked too long at sorrow and found no bottom to it. "Mr. Boone," she said softly. "Elias Boone, isn't it?" He nodded, wary. "I'm May Callahan," she continued. "From over the ridge." "Aye." Her voice caught, and she looked away toward the corral. "I heard the baby crying." The air between them hung heavy. He didn't invite her in. Folks didn't come to the Boone place anymore. "She's all right," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. May's gaze drifted to the cradle just visible beyond the doorframe. "She sounds hungry." Elias stiffened. "She's fine," he repeated. May hesitated, then took a small step forward. "I lost mine 2 months back," she said quietly. "A boy." Never took a full breath. Her eyes shimmered with something he recognized too well, grief that didn't know where to go. "But my milk came in, and it hasn't stopped. I can't bear the ache of it, or the sound of that baby crying. So I thought maybe if you'd let me." He stared at her, heat rising behind his eyes. The offer shamed him. It shamed them both. He wanted to tell her no, to shut the door and protect what was left of his pride. But behind him, Mabel began to cry again, thin and desperate, the sound of need that couldn't wait for dignity. May flinched, hands twisting in her shawl. "Please," she whispered. "Just for now." Elias stepped aside without speaking. She entered like someone walking into a church, her eyes flicking around the dim room. The air smelled of smoke and spoiled milk, of grief sealed tight. May set down her shawl, went to the cradle, and lifted Mabel with hands that trembled at first, then steadied. Elias turned away, unable to watch. He stood by the window, staring out at the prairie, the light sharp on the horizon. Behind him, the baby's crying softened, turned into a wet little sigh. Then came the faintest hum, a lullaby he hadn't heard since Clara sang it by the fire. His throat tightened. When he turned back, May was sitting in Clara's old chair, Mabel cradled against her, humming low. Tears slipped down her face, and she didn't wipe them away. The baby fed greedily, her small fingers curled in the fabric of May's dress. The sight undid him. It was too much mercy for one room. After a long while, May looked up. "She's strong," she said softly. "Stronger than she sounds." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The fire crackled in the stove. Outside, the wind had quieted, as if listening. When the child finally slept, May laid her gently in the cradle. The silence that followed was fragile, like a new glass waiting to break. She rose and adjusted her shawl. "I should go," she said. Elias found his voice then. "You can stay a while. It's a long ride back." May hesitated. The shadows in the room lengthened. "If it's no trouble," she murmured. "No trouble," he said. She sat again, by the fire this time, staring into the flames. The light flickered over her face, showing the years of hurt and endurance. Elias sat across from her, feeling the strangeness of another heartbeat in the room. Neither spoke. The baby sighed in her sleep. Outside, dusk rolled down over the plains. The last light caught on the grave up on the hill, turning the mound a faint, forgiving gold. May's voice broke the silence. "They talk about you in town," she said. He gave a short, dry laugh. "I figured." "They don't know what loneliness can do to a person," she said. "What silence can sound like when there's no one left to answer it." He looked at her, really looked at her. The lines of her face were tender and worn, not beautiful in the way he remembered beauty, but honest in a way that hurt. "No," he said. "They don't." For a long time they sat that way, the fire crackling between them, grief and need braided in the quiet. May reached down, drew the blanket higher over the baby's chest. Her hand brushed his as she did, just a whisper of touch, accidental, unthinking. But it lingered in the air like a question neither dared to answer. The wind rose again outside, carrying the scent of rain. In the stillness that followed, Elias Boone realized he was afraid for the first time in weeks, not of loss, but of what it might mean to feel something again. The baby stirred, then sighed, as if dreaming. And for a heartbeat, the ranch no longer felt empty. By the time spring settled over Dust Creek, the prairie had begun to green again, timidly at first, like the land itself wasn't sure it deserved to live. The wildflowers came in hesitant bursts along the fence line, and Elias Boone found himself noticing their colors for the first time since Clara's passing. The house no longer felt like a tomb. The smell of fresh bread sometimes drifted through the open windows, and Mabel's laughter had started to fill the empty corners. May Callahan's presence had worked its quiet miracle, though neither of them spoke of it. Still, the world beyond the ranch had not softened. In town, tongues wagged sharp as knives. Elias heard the murmurs when he went for supplies. The widow Callahan living under his roof, nursing his child as if she were her own. Men smirked. Women turned their faces away. The preacher's wife crossed the street rather than meet his eyes. Each word found its way back to him like grit under the skin. He said nothing, though every whisper cut him down a little more. May felt it too. He saw the tightness in her shoulders when she came back from town, her smile a little thinner each time. One evening, as the light bled out of the sky, he found her sitting on the porch steps, shawl drawn close. "You shouldn't have to bear their talk," he said. She looked out toward the fading horizon. "Talk's all they've got. Let them spend it." Then, softer, "It's only words, Elias. I've lived through worse." He wanted to believe her, but her voice trembled on the edge of exhaustion. He could feel her pride wearing thin. The next morning, the sound of horses broke the dawn. Elias stepped outside, shotgun slung low but unloaded. 3 riders approached, the preacher, flanked by 2 of the town's men. Their faces were hard, self-righteous. The preacher raised his hand in greeting that wasn't quite a greeting. "Boone," he said. "We come on behalf of the good folk of Dust Creek. There's talk and it's troubled people some. You know what I'm speaking of." Elias's jaw tightened. "If they're troubled, they can stay out of my business." The preacher sighed, all solemn pity. "The Lord don't take kindly to impropriety." A man and a woman, livin' alone, unwed, it don't sit right. Folks worry for the example it sets. May stepped out then, Mabel on her hip. Her face was calm, though her eyes burned. The only example we set is kindness, she said. And survival. If your lord's got a problem with that, maybe he ought to come tell me himself. The men shifted uncomfortably. The preacher's mouth thinned. You're playin' with scandal, Mrs. Callahan. Better scandal than starvation, she replied. Elias felt pride swell in his chest, unexpected, fierce. The preacher opened his mouth again, but Elias cut him off. That's enough. You've said your piece. Now ride. They did, reluctantly, dust rising behind them. When the sound of hooves faded, Elias turned to May. She was shaking slightly, though her expression didn't falter. You shouldn't have had to do that, he said. She met his gaze. And you shouldn't have to hide behind silence. I'm not ashamed of what's here. That night, May moved quietly through the house, lighting the lamps one by one. The glow warmed the walls, chasing away the shadows. Elias sat by the fire, Mabel asleep against his chest, feeling the weight of her words. Not ashamed. He repeated them to himself, tasting them like a prayer. The next day, the sky turned strange. Clouds rolled over the prairie in long gray sheets, low and heavy, and the air went still before the storm. May was in the garden planting sage by Clara's grave, her hands sunk deep in the earth. Elias joined her, kneeling beside her in silence. Together they planted until the first drops of rain fell. By nightfall, the storm had come full and wild. Lightning split the sky, thunder shaking the windows. Mabel began to cry upstairs. May went to fetch her while Elias checked the barn. The horses were restless, stamping and snorting. He moved from stall to stall, calming them with quiet words. Then came the flash, blinding white, and the sharp crack that followed. The lightning struck the hayloft. Fire leapt fast as breath. May! He shouted, running for the bucket by the door. She appeared in the doorway, clutching the baby to her chest. Smoke thickened, choking the air. Get back in the house! He yelled. I'm not leaving you. The flames spread to the rafters. He threw water, but it hissed uselessly against the heat. A beam cracked and fell, catching May's skirt as she tried to move. She stumbled, shielding Mabel with her body. Elias dropped the bucket and lunged forward, tearing the fabric free, pulling her upright. They stumbled through smoke and rain together, coughing, gasping. Behind them, the barn collapsed with a roar that seemed to shake the stars themselves. They fell to their knees in the mud, soaked through. Mabel wailed, but she was safe in May's arms. Elias pressed his forehead to May's, their breath mingling in the wet night. You came knockin' when I'd stopped here in the world, he said, voice hoarse. She looked at him through the rain, eyes bright as firelight. And you opened the door. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm softened to a whisper, the sky above them breaking open to reveal a scatter of trembling stars. They stayed like that, two broken souls bound by something wordless and whole. Days later, the barn lay in ruins, but the house stood unharmed. Together they cleared the ash, rebuilt the fence, planted again. In town, the gossip dulled. When Elias rode in for nails and feed, the men looked away, and the women didn't whisper as loud. Something had shifted. Dust Creek had seen them tested by fire and found them standing. On Sunday, Elias shaved, put on his cleanest shirt, and hitched the wagon. May stood beside him, Mabel bundled in her arms. They rode into town together, the wind cool and gentle. When they reached the church steps, every head turned. The preacher paused mid-sermon as they entered, his gaze flicking from Elias to May, then down to the child. A silence hung, long and uncertain. Then he nodded once and went on with his reading. May sat beside Elias, her hand brushing his where it rested on the pew. He didn't move it away. The baby cooed softly between them. Outside, sunlight spilled through the church windows, warm and clean as forgiveness. When the service ended, they walked out together, slow and unhurried. The prairie stretched wide before them, the sky washed clear after the storm. Elias looked down at May, her hair lifting in the breeze, and felt something settle inside him. Not peace exactly, but the start of it. He thought of Clara, of her laughter carried on the wind, and of the knock that had changed everything. Maybe mercy didn't come from heaven, he thought. Maybe it just walked down a dusty road one day, and asked to be let in. As they reached the wagon, May looked back at the horizon, where the land shimmered gold beneath the sun. "Feels different today," she said. Elias nodded. "It does." The reins creaked in his hands as they set off down the road, the baby's soft breath between them. Behind them, Dust Creek shimmered in the light, quiet, watching, waiting to see what might grow from the ashes.